Well, good afternoon to you all. Thank you so much for coming. This session, this breakout session, is called The Future of the National Oil Companies. My name is Eithne Treanor, and I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. Now, today we're going to focus on Jakarta and Nigeria. So we've got a very, very special privilege to have the key players here with us in the room, and we hope that it'll be a very engaging discussion. We really want you to take an opportunity to make sure that you have time to ask them questions. And when we look around the world, we look at the shifting position of many NOCs. We've particularly seen it with Saudi Aramco particularly. It's been a big year for Saudi Aramco, of course, and I think all the other national oil companies are probably keeping an eye on them right now and going, wow, how did they do that? Maybe not, but, and of course we've also seen here in Abu Dhabi a lot of work going on with ADNOC and just the consolidation of ADNOC into one company. When you think back only about 5 years ago, and if you were ever a vendor and doing any work with ADNOC 5 years ago, you had to register with 13 different operations. And it didn't run probably as smooth as it did. They all individually ran fabulously. But I think we see the vision that Sultan Al Jaber has had, and we now see a very, very different national oil company than we saw here a few years ago. But we're going to focus, as I said, on Jakarta and Nigeria, and I'd just like you to give a very warm welcome. We're delighted to have here with us the Group Managing Director of NNPC, the national oil company, of course, from Nigeria, Mele Kyari. So thank you so much for being with us. We're delighted to have you here. And also we have the President and Commissioner for Pertamina, Basuki Purnama. Thank you so much. So let me just start and perhaps maybe get a view from both of our esteemed guests here on what they see as the future of a national oil company. And again, for every country, I think this is different, very much different than the IOCs particularly. Every country is going to have a different position in terms of where it stands, what it does, its mission, its function, and its place within the global market, because all of the national oil companies, of course, are as vital as many of the bigger ones, and we need to see what's going on. So, Mele, if I may start with you, and just talk to us in terms of where you see that vision of the future of the national oil companies.
Thank you very much, Eithne. First of all, I think you can avoid it today before you talk about the future of the national oil companies. And the ambition of every national oil company, that's general to all, is to become global companies, to become companies that are energy companies, not just oil companies, and also companies that will make profit and contribute to national growth and development, which might be a different perspective from a typical oil and gas company. National oil companies always struggle to have a balance between their needs to become enabler of economies, makers of revenue for countries, and they are essentially owned by resource-dependent, they're actually in resource-dependent countries that have national oil companies. That's very clear to all. So when you look at this perspective, combining the need to have value to the local economy and then becoming a competitive multinational corporation or company in whatever context, then the challenges become a bit difficult for national oil companies. Therefore, the expectation of every national oil company is to be a global player, ultimately. And to be a global player, you must do well at home. And for nearly all the national oil companies, the easy route to that is to have some form of public ownership of equity in these companies, which is what Aramco tried to do. But that's not easy in all countries. Because the local environments now come to play. Some countries don't want to part with ownership of these companies. In some countries, if you're going to part with it, how much of these assets are you ready to let go to private ownership? And the combination of this is that the future of national oil companies are quite challenging because balancing the local expectations, the local politics, you can't avoid that because there's a company owned by states usually, and you cannot take it away from the phobia of public scrutiny and of course of public interest in what you do. So that balancing makes it a little difficult for national oil companies to become as flexible as a typical oil and gas company And therefore, what I see happening for national oil companies in the future is that they have to transit, not energy transit that we commonly speak about in the industry, but transit from being typically company owned by states to company owned by a wider, broader spectrum of ownership structure. And if you do that, you now become more competitive, you deliver more value, and you still don't lose the very fact that all national oil companies are enabler organizations. I don't know, Eithne, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll talk more about that. I just want to get the view also from Mr. Purnama as well on that, and I'll come back to what you're talking about. But I think a great focus there. Please, again, where do you see the national oil company of the future? Because things are changing rapidly, and we've seen them with many of the bigger companies. And then in light of what the demands of the public in Jakarta are, what you need, of course, in your country as well. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. I think for us is how to use Pertamina, our national oil company, to increase the people welfare. What we want to do is, like we talk about, we have, I think the largest in the world, we have a crude palm oil. We really want to focus in like a biofuel, even a bioethanol. We believe in the future of this world, people talk about environment, people talk about the health issue. Many people want to talk about electric vehicle. I think this already in the market, China or Europe, they have their own market. But Indonesia, we have our own market too, with 250 million. We believe in the future, who has the big market will control the market. That's what we're planning now. We want to develop. We have 83,000 villages. Our dream is to become the supply chain, logistic chain in our 83,000 villages. For what? We want to sell in one price, the product, because Indonesian ideology is how to give justice to all the people. What we do now is we give a subsidy to the poor and needy people, but with the different price. That's why too many fraud. So our dream is how to use our gas station in the whole village with a non-cash payment to every day keep updating who have the right call the poor and the needy. So we will subsidy directly to the person, use a banking system. That's our dream. How about the oil? We have developed almost 6 new refinery, our planning. But this refinery is like dual mode when to convert to the petrochemical. We believe in the future, people will talk about the petrochemical. That's our dream in Indonesia. First is a biofuel. We talk about supply chain, logistic. And the most important is how to make sure the poor people and the needy got their right. And when we use this Pertamina, it's like a big conglomerate in Indonesia. If we say like this, in 2009, the top of the conglomerate of Indonesia, their EBITDA only $2.5 billion US. Pertamina got a 9.2. This is still small, actually, if you use benchmarking in the world. But for us, it's like the biggest conglomerate in Indonesia. So our dream is, in the next 5 years, we want to develop a new University of Pertamina, become a research, innovation, industry, technology center. Maybe we will spend almost 100 million US dollar in this 5 years in R&D. That's our dream. We want to move to the new capital city. In Kalimantan, they have a palm plantation, they have a coal mining, they have also the oil and gas mining. So we want to make this area become the new for R&D. We believe in this next 5 years, we spend 100 million or 200 million from our profit to find out how to create the new fuel, new healthy, when people try to leave the fossil fuel. That's our dream.
Well, we'll look at that in just a minute, but go into more detail in terms of what you're doing, because there's a lot of, it's an exciting time, I think, in the industry for everybody. And it's interesting how you talk too about making sure there's energy for the poor. This is a big issue, particularly in Africa. Not too long ago, not perhaps in Nigeria as much, but I believe it was, I think, the minister from Uganda I had on a panel not too long ago, and she actually said to me how she will be, they're aiming to get 60% of their population to have access to energy. Really, in Nigeria, you should be almost, I think, the center of the region, perhaps supporting, and you are in many areas supporting the countries around there. But when we look at energy poverty in Africa, I mean, how good or bad is that situation, particularly in Nigeria?
Yes, thank you. It's bad. I think that's the summary is bad. We are very, very energy deficient. Probably less than 50% of the population have access to electricity.
No, I'm surprised with that. I thought it would be a better figure in Nigeria, but thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes, about that number. About 50% have access to electricity. And electricity is everything. Today we're focused on making sure that we deliver energy to everyone. And that means investing hugely into energy infrastructure. And we are clearly positioned to easily deliver that. Maybe probably the number of our focus wasn't really very significant, but now we're looking at it differently. As we may be aware.
Are you also looking with, the National Oil Company to become the national energy company? Do you see that is now almost a requirement, a mandate for you to provide, energy to the whole country?
Indeed, by law in our country, the National Oil Company has the responsibility to guarantee energy security for the country. That's the role of the National Oil Company. By law, that hasn't changed. Even if you become a commercial company, you still have that role left for you to manage, which means that when we say energy security in our country, we mean first line is to have availability of finished petroleum product available to everyone, just like my colleague from Pertamina said, affordable for everyone. Then secondly is to have the wider energy security issues, which involves provision of power and energy, electric power. Electric power, for us, we, as a national oil company, as a country, we're a gas country, really, not an oil country. We are known as an oil country, but we are actually a gas country. And that means that we have more gas resources than we have of oil resources.
And you have great ambitious plans for gas. Tell us a little bit about the gas. And you've done, congratulations on the deal that you've actually just done with Train 7, but very ambitious plans in terms of gas for the country and to make sure you have energy security.
Yes, we have two focus. One is to make money from gas so that we can use it to build our infrastructure, which the export projects do for us. That's why we're very keen on getting the Train 7 FID taken, and that's gone. And we're looking forward to other trends to follow up so that we can make more money from gas, and that we can monetize the gas so that we can make money to improve on our other infrastructure. But the second leg of it is that we're deepening our activities around domestic gas supply. Domestic gas means that we can use gas to do two things. We power our energy, our country, and also to provide feedstock for gas-based industries. And by powering the industry, our country through thermal plants, we're also looking at opportunities around West Africa. So as you are aware, we're the biggest economy in Africa, and we are surrounded by countries who are less fortunate than us. And therefore, the easiest source of power even for them is getting gas from. So we are talking to all of them. We are extending our grids to make sure that once we produce excess power, we're able to deliver it to our neighboring countries. And therefore, Nigeria really is an opportunity for West Africa. And we're ambitious. Yes, that is very true, but they are realizable. Thank you very much.
Now, when we look at Indonesia, this is, I think your daily crude production is something about 750,000 at the moment, but your consumption is 1.4 million. Now, I believe your president recently has also said that you want to reduce imports. So there's clearly a gap there when demand is higher than supply. You have to bring imports in. How are you going to manage that?
First, we already plan a big exploration. for these 5 or 10 years. We also already accomplished the seismic. We already could find a big, I think we have a big reservoir we could find from this first seismic. We already accomplished from the west until the east side. And we also want to change our regulation about the tax. So, Mr. President have a new tax law to help the investor come to for exploration. Because now most of the oil company don't interest to do exploration in Indonesia. And the last 3 years, maybe they changed to the gross spread. The one is production sharing contract. So now we open the two options, which one the investor want to choose. And the second is we have a big opportunity also in the gas production. We want to convert all our electricity power to use a gas. And we also open also the gas for developing the methanol factory. Because we use a biofuel, we need, farming is come from CPO and the methanol. As also we want to have our own methanol plant. This year we are planning to develop a 1 million output capacity in methanol. We have a gas we sell to the Singapore and will stop in 2023. We will stop to sell to Singapore. This year we will start to develop a methanol factory. And we believe if we change the, how to say, the regulation, the people will come for do more exploration. And we open for cooperate with all the national oil company. What we want is a strategic long-term. I talk to Nigeria, maybe some dispute, we want to talk again. That's why today I introduce our CEO, maybe you have to know, Ibu.
Yes, we're very honored
Nika.
she's here with us. So
And also we have Pak Hasto, is how to deal with the oil company. Our policy is very clear. We want a long strategic partner. The president will sign is with the Eithne. We really want end-to-end until from the crude oil until to the petrochemical. We open everything for this.
Thank you. And I do want to talk more about the downstream. In fact, for perhaps, maybe stay with this at the moment, and I'm going to look at the downstream too in Nigeria as well and see how things are looking at that. You're looking, again, at ambitious plans, 6 refineries that you're looking at in Indonesia.
Yeah.
How is the investment climate at the moment in terms of getting those? Obviously, you need the end product. It makes no sense to be importing product into Indonesia, into any country. You may as well do it there. I think every country should be probably doing that, but there's nothing, you're never too late to do it. But this is probably something you should have been looking at, in the last few years. How are you sure that now you can actually get the funding to go ahead and get these refineries underway?
How about the funding? Our big dream is we want to have a market cap $100 billion from our subsidiary. That's why in our planning, from the shipping, from the retail business, in our calculation, now we have used many advisors and consultants to do this. Our dream, we have a market cap of 100 billion. We will use our subsidiary, we will go to the market. Not the Pertamina, the subsidiary. Because our cost become the revenue from our subsidiary company. That's why this year we hope in this year, maybe June or July, we will roadshow this is the planning to meet many national oil company and also like the investor to talk about this.
Now, of course, it's a competitive landscape, and all of the national oil companies, are beginning, they're out there knocking on investors' door looking for that very highly competitive dollars that are there. It's important to make strong relationships with many of the IOCs and indeed with other companies. Talk to me a bit, Mele, about you reaching out perhaps to ADNOC, to Saudi Aramco, to other companies that can actually work with you. This is no longer working in isolation as a national oil company. It's about making those strong connections to build a better company.
Yes, indeed, Eithne. We have current engagements with Aramco, with ADNOC, with a number of other national oil companies, including our close relations with Equatorial Guinea. My Honourable Minister is here. A number of other West African countries that are resource dependent and of course on the same trajectory with us. What that does for us is from not all national oil companies have the same scale or capacity. Particularly some of them have enormous resources in their disposal. They are looking for markets outside their local environment. And that's why we're talking to the global portfolio of national oil companies. And that collaboration brings on the table a sharing of abilities and capabilities, bringing them to invest in countries that are outside their normal areas of operation. And also, by talking to each other, we're also able to consolidate and have a relationship that will make our interactions with our other partners, the international oil companies and other mid-sized companies and even larger international companies to come into play, so that there's a common rule of the play that everybody can see. Some transparency and visibility is introduced to our relationship with this international company, such that we don't have the kind of situation that today one country is good for investment, the next day it has changed, and that will that interaction will enable us have very, very similar and clearly competitive fiscal environment, which is the real problem in most resource-dependent countries. International investors can't see stability in fiscal environment, and also they cannot see the relativity between one country and the other, and that becomes a difficulty. And that's why in my country for about 7 to 8 years, there are not a single FID on a major project, and that's clearly related to the fiscal instability, which we are resolving, and that's why you have seen the traction on some of the major projects today. And that's what now interactions with our core national oil companies, that we bring that on the table so that the industry can be energized, so that it can benefit all of us. We do talk to each other. We share data, we share information, and we share perspective. And in the recent times, it has worked to the best interest of the entire industry, not just the national oil companies.
Keep the microphone. Are you finding more interest from investors when we look over many years and we look at Nigeria and we look at the investor appetite and we look at, I suppose, the corporate reputation? There have been times when the company has said before, at NNPC that perhaps part of the company, the big wish and the big dream would be to maybe IPO part of the company, and that it hasn't happened. You've got to get the investors back. You've got to get that confidence back. What are you going to do? Because you're now in a position to actually do this, and in many ways it's your responsibility to make sure this time that it actually works. Can you share maybe some plans, the ones you can share with us?
Yes, we're promised to be transparent, and we'll do that. Two things. There are two levels of participation by partners in the business of a national oil company. One is in terms of partnership, either in form of a production sharing contract or some form of joint venture arrangements where you contribute and make contributions, and then the business is run. The long-term part of national oil companies' ambition is to sell equity in the company. And I'm sure we're all aware of the Aramco story and how much time it has taken them to get to this place. It's quite a complex process. And the ultimate ambition for us as NNPC is to become clearly a commercial company, which by legislation, there's an ongoing process to put the right legislation in place. We're very hopeful that this will be delivered this year. Once that is done, it automatically transits the current national oil company from what it is today to clearly a commercial national oil company. That would prepare it for subsequent ownership change if necessary, so that we do need to build some capacity. You need to have visibility. You need to have processes. You need to have the right books, so that when investors come to take equity, that they know what they are dealing with. And we're not there yet, and therefore our first step is to make it a commercial company and then transit into a multinational company in transition.
And I mean, how realistic are those plans? I mean, what are you hearing back? What's the investor community? And indeed, if there's anybody here, perhaps it's a good time to maybe ask a few questions on this. I mean, what's the sentiment out there? What are you hearing?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is everybody is waiting to see what we do with our fiscal legislation. And that's the first thing that we have to sort out. And we're very focused on that. And as we do this, we also know that this industry...
And how happy or on a scale of sort of 1 to 10, where do you sit in terms of how fast the government's moving on that? And maybe you need to give them a bit more encouragement.
I think 7 to 8 as the national oil company, and I'm aware that we will lead this in very many ways because the government will rely on our judgment to put this legislation in place because we probably have the skills and abilities to help them with that. I know it's a legislative process, but essentially it has to be driven by the national oil company. And we're giving them all the support and encouragement and the leadership that is required to deliver on that. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I can think between 7 and 8. We're very close to that.
Well, that's very optimistic, and it's great to hear because I think, we look back over the years and it may be opportunities that have been missed, which has been very unfortunate for Nigeria because it really should be, the pearl of the whole region. And indeed, I think that's what everybody wants to see it. It's year by year. We just look for better things to come from there. Talk to us a little bit about in Indonesia too, about that competition for investment. Like when investors are looking in the region and of course right around your region, how do you make sure that you get their attention to come to Indonesia rather than, other projects that are going to be going on by, other countries nearby?
Yeah, first, the Mr. President already show very clear. We will have a very good transparency. That's why he put me in the chairman to transform this Pertamina to become the new system company. We don't want to do many, that we say, the markup or corruption again. It's very strong message from the Mr. President. We fight for this corruption, nepotism. We use the transparent. Like this year, we will recruit from the Anti-Corruption Commission people. Maybe we will recruit 100 to become our internal auditor. We just have appointed the new chief internal auditor. And we changed the system in this company. We will give a good incentive for the board of director. And if they have become a board of commissioner and subsidiary, they do it as a pro bono. You could not do it just want to increase the salary. And we also talk with the transaction agency to point out who have the big money. We believe the root of every problem in our national oil company is corruption. Too many high costs like a shipping, like exploration, or gas. Mr. President very upset about our gas price. It's too high. The Mr. President want at least under $4. If we could do this, we believe many factory industry will invest in Indonesia. This is the second term of our president. And Mr. President said, we have nothing to lose. We just want to leave the legacy in this country. And Pertamina is the one, is our hope to transform this country for the people welfare. Because it's like a big conglomerate, I told you. And we believe it's not difficult for us to have a profit $4 billion a year. Because everything is inefficient. We try to find out. We already appoint like a EY, BCG consultant, McKinsey, to find out which part is a markup and also have a collusion, the corruption, between the inside and the outside. And the president like to say it's like a mafia, it's like a godfather. You have to find out. I said, it's easy to find. We just find out. What's the benchmark for the price like a shipping? They're too corrupt in the shipping, in the procurement. We also work with the BCG. We want to make procurement, we want to copy like a Petronas maybe. We want to make it more efficient. Everything become one central. We really want to control everything. How to do it? Transparency. The bidding, everything is transparency.
And again, I think that's a word we hear, right across the industry. Now, you brought up the word corruption, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to use that same word. And just when we look at Nigeria, and there's probably a lot of people out there when we look at, business in Nigeria, and people might actually associate that term, with it. And maybe there might be a little bit of fear on investor side. Again, you're talking to the investors. What are you hearing from them? And are they worried, and are you worried? Because I think in every industry, we in every report, we're still looking at governance and looking at the need for better governance. You said, yes, that you're definitely looking at better transparency in the industry. But do we still have that legacy of, the perception is definitely there. Can you address that for me?
Yes, I will. First of all, maybe this very informed audience may not be aware that Nigeria is signatory. Probably many developed countries didn't do that. We are signatory to the EITI Commodity Trading Initiative Network. That throws obligations on you. One of it is that you must be clearly transparent on all your transactions. So that they are verifiable. You publish every record that is possible. You declare the beneficial owners of companies that do business with us. And I'm aware also, because I'm part of the global network for transparency, that many countries are not part of this. And that's a very bold step, because corruption, as Chairman has said, is discretion. If you don't have discretion, nobody will pay you. Corruption is about discretion, exercising discretion that you shouldn't do. And what we did as a country, since the coming of this president, our president came on the platform of fighting corruption. And that's the basis for his legitimacy to bring out security, fiscal security of lives and properties, and also to fight corruption, and also to improve on the combination of these two will bring improvement in the economy. That's the basis of the election of Mr. President Buhari. And this has been his persuasion. So yes, we do have a past. That perhaps sometimes we don't like to talk about it, but today I'm sure the international community is very aware, including our business partners. I hope some of them are here. I can see some people from the international oil company. We are different. Indeed, we are doing better than most jurisdictions today. Perception is a problem. Before you get out of it, people would like to see it work. And the way it will work is to see more investment coming into the country, people having more confidence in what you're doing, and that we have started seeing. Otherwise, without even having the petroleum industry legislation put in place, we took investments of $10 billion from our partners on the basis of trust that we're going to do the right thing. And that's very reassuring, Eithne. And I know that for sure, the fear of influences, corruption, and discretion, and I've advocated this in very many fora in the global platform, that there will be no corruption without collaboration of everybody. Everybody means from the banks, which are both local and international, and indeed all of us are oil and gas people here. We know that there's no transaction of $100,000 that doesn't go through an international bank in this industry. It's impossible. Therefore, the beneficial recipient of this cash flow, whether in terms of cost or whatever form, is known to all of us. And I've advocated that the banks in the international arena, the regulatory agencies of most of the countries where these banks are residents, where these companies, the international companies that operate in the local companies are resident, need to come on the table. It isn't enough to blame local national oil companies or their subsidiaries for corruption, because it is a wider challenge for all of us. And that collaboration and that bringing it on the table for everybody has brought great relief to all of us. Our partners are more confident that we'll do the right things today, but we'll have to work together to do it. In that sense, Eithne, I'm very confident that it's not what people know. We're very proud to be Nigerians today, and we know that we are doing things differently. Our president has ensured that that is on the table. But corruption is really one element of our challenges, and we're facing them head on. And we're going to bring everybody on the net.
And of course, that shift, I think, comes from the leadership and a lot of responsibility on yourself in terms of how, you deal with. Do you have these conversations, company-wide? Do you have these conversations with your people when you're looking at your future business plan, when you're perhaps holding town halls with them in terms of how this is a company that has to be, has to sort of, rise its position, make sure that that perception is, a thing of the past, and actually that it's the company and the people that really have to lead by example and actually make sure that you turn this around into a world-class company.
Absolutely, as Mr. Chairman is aware, and Adnok and Aramco, every one of them here, the national oil companies in resource-dependent countries they are the number one line of contact with international community. They are also the number one institution that enables economic growth, development, infrastructure, everything that you can think of. When you don't get the national oil companies right, everything else fails. So no matter how you look at it, in the short term, I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I know that in the short term, the next 10 years, the national oil companies will clearly remain the most significant players in the economies of all the resource-dependent countries. And therefore, the way to go today is, for us in NNPC, is to recognize this reality, to see this company as an enabler company that has to work, and has to work for every one of us, and for both for the investors and for the country, people, and the people of our country and our citizens. And the only way to do this is we took one element of our persuasion, which is to say that we are going to build this company on the grounds of transparency, accountability, so that we can perform excellently. This is our persuasion. And this principle has permeated all the sectors of our company. We do town hall meetings. We do have templates that everybody has to. We have to have sign off on non-interference, on confidentiality where it is necessary, and then also on wherever we know something that is wrong, it must be put on the table. But we also know that we need the cooperation of everybody. And everybody means our partners. Sometimes contractors can be crazy. And I think that with due respect, maybe the wrong word to use. But, sometimes contractors believe that anything is possible. That's global. And then once they see discretion in your process and your system, they will exploit it. And it's very understandable that they will do this, because many of these companies don't care what happens as long as their P&L becomes good. That's good for them. So what we are doing is to remove discretion, so that you cannot make certain decisions that are fundamental without recourse to a process. That process has all the checks and the balances, and then ultimately we know that this will work. And we know that most national oil companies do. We share notes with most of them. The problems that Chairman has highlighted, it's not just common to Pertamina. It is across most resource-dependent countries' oil and gas business operations. And of course, with due respect, I would like to say that there are a number of influences that are outside the companies that is coming from partners that are outside the countries.
So there's still work to be done. You can hold on to this. Now, there's a lot of big support around the world for a cleaner, greener environment. And also in terms of coming from investment. Tomorrow, actually, I'm doing a whole panel on ESG and looking at where, the pressure is on all of the companies to actually make sure that they're playing their part. What pressure is on, your company, on Pertamina? What are you finding? What are you doing? You talked a bit about biofuel and all that, but what are you doing, and also what's the pressure for you to actually make sure that you're part of the energy solution, not just oil and gas? Alternatives, renewables, all of that. Are you bringing that under your umbrella?
Yeah, one of the number one alternative is from gas. We have a big reserve in the gas. And also we have a big resources in biofuel. And also we have a geothermal. It's a big, also we're not yet like a wind, water, but that's not our Pertamina part. Our part is we want to develop a biofuel. We want to work with the farmer, how to have their own crude palm plantation. The government collect the money from every ton selling of the palm fruit. We have one body, that this body will work with us to develop a new factory to supply our biofuel need. That is our planning. And also, what the most important is how to use this situation when we still have a lot of money to help all the fillets use the money. Each village, the government send 145,000 US dollar a year. They don't know how to use this money. So we want to use we become the master franchise as a Pertamina. We will manage all this asset, become like a hub. We have the most efficiency supply chain. So every village will have their own logistic stock. And then we believe Pertamina will also spot like a electric station. Like the car, everything, we will move to this to have a sustainable, good environment in Indonesia.
But when we look at, the uptake on electric cars, they're not cheap at the moment. And I do know that there's good supply coming out of China, so closer to home for you of a cheaper electric car. But, realistically, are you ready as a country that, and what's the uptake for electric cars in your country? What are you driving these days?
Yeah, I think for Indonesia, it's no problem with the electric vehicle because in a remote area, they will still use this combusting engine. Like electrical, we have the biggest reserve in a nickel to make this electrical. That's why the China make a big investment in Sulawesi in Indonesia. Because the number one biggest reserve in the nickel, where we have another, but we have to work with the China to provide this market. Indonesia is a huge market, 250 million people. And if we could distribute well to help the poor people and the needy of Indonesia, and if we could have an efficiency in the oil and gas, we believe we could sell the cheaper energy to the people. That's our dream. Our company is how to make the money. Yeah, we will use our logistics supply chain. This is the e-commerce era. Even the e-commerce, you need a logistic. I believe none of the private sector feasible to have their own logistic in the whole area. But we, Pertamina, could do this. Why? Because the capex is not from us. We just OPEC. The capex is come from the village fund. 145 million, 145,000 US dollar in every village. We have 83,000 villages. Every year, this money use a national budget. That's why we want to combine this, including the private sector in the palm plantation. We want to combine this to provide the poor and the needy, to increase the people welfare. And we believe everybody, even China, Japan, Korea, they have an interest in our market. That's why from the first, I told you, who will lead the energy transform everything? The country with the biggest population. Indonesia is lucky, we have a demographic surplus. Under 30 years old, 60%. That's why we want to provide the most important, all the villages have to increase their welfare first. That's why we want to use this Pertamina, to use this profit, to use this power. It's like a conglomerate, private sector, combined with the power from the Mr. President to make all of this could happen. That's why one of the reasons the President appoint me as the chairman of this oil company, because he trusts me could transform this, and he will fully back up. I think no chairman in the former national oil company like Pertamina in Indonesia before could directly talk to the Mr. President. I think maybe only me, because I am his deputy before in the government.
Exactly. No, and I mean, he was very adamant. He was handpicking you to do a very important job, and you have a huge responsibility in that sense. Please, we would like some questions from any of you. We don't have too much time left. We've only got about 10 minutes. So if anybody has a question, by all means, please do contribute to the conversation, anything you might want to ask. Once we were talking about China, I know you have a great relationship with China, and you're looking at a big pipeline project at the moment. How has that been going, and how important is it, and particularly that Chinese relationship and the Chinese investment?
This is tied to our energy deficiency initiatives, how to resolve that. And power is one of our major problems. So there's a gas plant, gas line we're trying to build, which will add additional 3,000 megawatts plus of power to our grid. And of course, we have too many things to do, so we don't have all the finances locally available to do that. That's why we approach the Chinese to fund that project. 85% of it to be financed by the Chinese NEXIM and support with EXIM in collaboration with other banks. And then, of course, the 15% will come from equity from the national oil company. These projects, we have practically closed the financial deal with the Chinese. We're just trying to get the paperwork right, and by the end of the year, or probably somewhere middle of the year, actually, much earlier than that, we can start draw down into that fund. And of course, in practical sense, this project will kick off physically either in February or March, and the procurement will commence. Physical construction will start in February or March. So we are good to go, and this is also tied to the energy transition issues. These issues around energy transition, about the renewables, which Chairman has pointed out to us, is a bit exotic. We have clearly power deficient, and we got to do something. The enormous resources we have in the fossil fuel, particularly gas, is something that we have to put on the table to make our economies grow. And of course, for electric cars, as you mentioned, as we know, even by all best forecasts, even by 2040, the renewables will contribute only about 20% of the entire energy mix. So really, you can avoid the fossil fuel in the short run. So there isn't any forecast that says that it will ever go down below 100 million barrels of oil demand in the next 20 to 30 years. So we know that this is resources that we have to develop and harness so that our economies can grow.
It's interesting when if you go to a conference on renewables, the attitude is obviously so different, and they just look and think it's all over for you guys. It's just a matter of time. But talk to me about the transition, and particularly in Nigeria. You look at what's happening on the streets of London. You look at what's happening around the world. You look at, and later we're going to talk about the Greta effect, and really looking at the demand from people out there. Obviously, in some countries, the demand is, and I think we heard this from the Indian minister not too long ago, it's about what fuel they're going to get for tomorrow, not so much the people are not really worried about what's going to happen in 20 years' time. It's more immediate for them. And again, in some places in Africa, this is going to be the case. But are you looking as a company at also expanding into the renewable space? And are you getting any pressure from investors in terms of, ESG and the requirements that you need to fill there? What are you hearing, and where is that transition of energy in Nigeria at the moment? Or do you think it's as urgent as it is in other countries?
Yes, as a country, we are signatory to all the environment agreements, which means, literally saying we need to take care of the environment. We believe this. We've signed up to this. We'll reduce the carbon prints of our operations. But that means, greater efficiency, not necessarily elimination. And therefore, and then the gas is the easiest way of achieving that. So what we are focusing on is to make sure this gas is delivered, monetized, and converted into value, both in terms of providing feedstock to thermal plants and to gas-based industries, so that we can also provide electricity, make money from it, and then expand our infrastructure development so that we bring our people out of the current poverty that we are. Then in the future, we can now talk about how you're out of poverty now, what else can we do different? This is our approach.
Now, talk to me a little bit about, Nigeria being a major player in OPEC. And obviously, you want to produce as much oil as you can. You need to make sure that you're selling your product out there, bringing in money for, the company, and indeed for, you almost have that dual agenda there, whereby, this is, you have to make money, and you have to be the national oil company as well, in terms of making sure that there's a social side to this as well. How important is it, that you're very much part of OPEC? I mean, I think when we look back over the years, without a doubt, OPEC wouldn't be OPEC without Nigeria. And at the moment, as long as Mr. Barkindo is there, it's going to, I think we're going to see more Africa there, which is also very encouraging, I think, for you. But looking at the agreement, the OPEC agreement at the moment, and looking at, the production adjustment that's been in place, how can Nigeria make sure that they do their bit in terms of this adjustment while making sure that you're a profitable company and you can make sure to look at your ambitions as well?
Thank you. Balancing the market serves the interests of all, both the producer and the consumer nations. Producer includes those who are outside the OPEC and the non-OPEC agreement fold. That means that the producer should be able to produce at optimum cost and then be able to recover his costs and make some margin out of that business. And also the consumer doesn't buy products or crude oil at prices that are out of alignment with realities around this. And we know what happens when that happens. You can make short-term money, and of course, ultimately it looks to the global challenge of collapses that we saw in 2008, 2007 associated with the high cost of it. So OPEC is not looking for very high crude oil prices, that I'm aware. And of course, that's not the ambition of the OPEC and non-OPEC cooperation, is to balance the market so that production remains stable, and then consumers are also protected. And in that respect, Nigeria, as almost a founding member of OPEC and a very prominent player in the OPEC scheme of things, is committed to the cost that we agreed that we're going to do. We have met our commitment by December, and we'll continue to collaborate on that. And as we also grow our production, it didn't mean that production will be stalled because there is an agreement to cut production. As we are aware, the OPEC cuts is limited to crude oil streams only. So you can produce condensate, which is not part of the OPEC engagements. So what we are seeing is we are focusing our production to more gas-based reservoirs, so that we'll continue to grow our production. We'll continue to make money from this well, from the oil, while we maintain the balance in the market.
Talk to me just while we're wrapping up here, just your downstream plans. What are you looking at on the bigger downstream plans, perhaps petrochemical? This region is very excited about the future for petrochemical. What are you looking and hoping for?
Yes, today, I think for us is, first of all, to become a net exporter of petroleum products. That's very critical for us. Today, we probably import almost 100% of our needs, despite the fact that we have 4 refineries.
So that's a very ambitious shift to flip that round to become a net exporter.
There's so much on the ground to see that happening latest by the 2023. In 3-4 years' time, we are out of this, because 2 things will happen. There's a Dangote refinery, 650 kVA, which can produce a very complex refinery that can actually make up to 50 million liters of gasoline if we want. And our current consumption or the evacuation today is around that number today. So if we could just get the Dangote refinery to run, you're sure that even without the NMPC refineries, you are at net position of not requiring any input. And of course, we are fixing our refineries, and that will add another 18 million liters of gasoline, plus the 50, that means you're at 68 million liters of gasoline every day production. That means literally by 2023, you are out of this situation of having to import petroleum product into a country. And of course, as you do this, as we are aware also, the industry is moving to more petchem. That's why you are seeing the maintenance of the 100 million barrels of global crude oil demand in the year. If you look at the breakdown, the numbers, you will see that more of the volumes are going to petchem. Petchem means, many things to all of us, more money, of course, but ultimately it's input for many of the infrastructure developments that we're going to see happening. So as we resolve our first problem, which is our challenge, is to become net exporter of petroleum products, which is our first trouble that we have. And then as we do this, probably parallel to that, we will now be focusing more on the petchem. There are a number of requests and engagement that are going on to have more LNG plants, more petchem plants, fertilizer plants that we are having engagements to develop. So we are focused on that, but our primary concern is to make sure that we do not have any need to import petroleum product into our country. Thank you.
And we maybe have one question. No, not a question at all. We have one. Sir, please. Just make sure everybody hears you here.
Myself, Jagan, I work for OECD, and I work on the innovation and digitization. So my point is, as the industry is shifting towards the renewables, what is your readiness approach towards the innovation and R&D side?
Indeed, and it's probably a good one to wrap it up on in terms of innovation, R&D, and making sure that you're ready to become the NOC of the future. Maybe, shall I start with you, and then I'll give you a closing word on this one. We'll give you a minute to
thank
think
you.
about it, because you've been busy talking.
Indonesia has many step in the price. That's why we already have a study, a group. We have a mining company to develop this electric vehicle battery. For Pertamina, we will focus in the distribution supply chain. It's a logistic. That's what we believe. Because in the Southeast Asia, Indonesia is the biggest automotive sales, 32% market share. That's why we will try to shift this. We will maybe follow Japan. Japan is now gradually they shift to the electric vehicle. And for the Pertamina, we will focus in the distribution supply chain with the advantage, the comprehensive advantage. We have 83,000 fillets with the gas station, the electric station, and the money is not used to Pertamina. We like a master franchise. And we will develop a new R&D university. We'll work with the crude palm money, and we open from another NOC to develop the innovative industry and also the R&D research in this new capital area. That's why in these 5 years, we will spend $100 million from Pertamina to develop this R&D.
Great, and long may this continue. I think we heard from, Saudi Aramco New Energy talking to this morning about all the different smaller startups and people like that they're supporting. And I know only recently I did an Africa Business Forum in Dubai, and we met some just tremendous young minds that were doing great startups in Africa. Are you finding that, in your R&D, I think particularly inside the company, but then outside the company as well? Are you finding new talent there that can actually help you to become an energy company of the future?
Yes, indeed. As you may be aware, the Nigerian youth probably is the most mobile in Africa and the most educated. My colleagues from Secretarial Guinea, with due respect to anyone from any African country here, that probably we have the most educated youth in Africa today. And the level of entrepreneurship development that we're seeing across Africa, or from young people, from new initiatives, from innovative actions and abilities that we have seen, is unparalleled. But that doesn't clearly tie into what we do in the oil and gas industry. I think that's the part of it that we'll have to work on, which is to bring this talent and abilities on the table so that it can be of value to the oil and gas industry, going forward. As we try to innovate. Innovation means doing things differently in a much more modern way, responding to the realities of today, and not necessarily about the renewables, because that's not the only area that requires innovation. And we're focused on the renewable, yes, but as I've said clearly, that the renewables will still remain for us now an exotic territory, and we'll get there. We're focusing on it, but ultimately the innovation will take us there. But we have problem. We have infrastructure deficit. We have power deficit. We're net importer of petroleum products, and we have huge poverty in our communities, and that's what we're focused on. Then we can now talk about it, because people are not talking about electric cars; they are talking about tricycles, and that's what we want to exit from first. Then we can move to the next level. Thank you.
Exactly. I think we have to keep that in mind when we look at different countries and their developing stages. Just a final word, Basuki, if there's, let's say, investors in the room with way too many billions sitting idly by and looking for good projects, what would your message be to them in terms of come to Indonesia and invest?
I want to say like this, maybe I will distribute my business card first. So if you have anything problem or difficulty in doing oil and gas business in Indonesia, let me know. I will help you pro bono. No fee, no tipping. I guarantee. Even if you need, I bring you to the president directly, I will bring to you. We really want to do the clean business, transparent, to make our country become the new country, new prospective country, no corruption. We really want our people increase their welfare. We guarantee about that. And we hope in the next 5 years, could find a new, because the president term already only 2 terms, but I believe he prepared the successor, the same value, the same perspective for our country. That's what we guarantee. Thank you very much.
Good, and we'll get the Nigeria investment message. We'll have to leave you a Nigeria investment message for people out there too. So just a quick message that you would give to, potential investors.
I think our investors I don't need to speak for them, but I think it's necessary I speak for them now, that I know there's renewed confidence in doing business with us. We have very high-level engagements with a number of multinational companies and countries, national oil companies, who have taken significant commitments to do business together, including that of financial closure with a number of them. And that, to us, is an indication that there's confidence has been restored and that we can do greater things together. Just like Chairman has said, I'm the CEO of the National Oil Company, not just the CEO of the national companies that have a responsibility to deliver on the energy needs of our country. And therefore, just as he has said, if you want to do business in the oil and gas in any company, for that matter, whether it's a service company or our partners or the national, talk to me. Nobody will dupe you, and that's the perception that people have. There will be no fraud, and I'm guaranteeing that. And that everything you have heard in the media they're all stories of the past, and they're no longer true. And first line of contact, talk to me. If you can't get me, the chief financial officer of the company is here, talk to him. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you both so much, really. And thank you very much for that, very, very open, very honest, I think, and also very realistic look at what's going on in both of your countries. And again, it's a lot of ambitious plans there, I think, from both of you. But without a doubt, I think we have the right people in place to make sure that they're there. And I just absolutely love that, determination, I think, from both of you. And I really, really appreciate you sharing with us those great plans you have in place. But again, your almost personal commitment to making sure that they're carried out. So the countries are in the good hands. So I want to thank you all for coming here. Thanks for sharing with us. I hope this has been enlightening for you. I hope it's been somewhat informing, educational, and hopefully there's something there that we can all look to and learn. And as you say, you're open for business. So you'll be here with us for the next few days. For another day too, and we'll have an opportunity to talk to you. So Basuki, Purnama, thank you so much for being here, and Mele, Kyari. So once again, thank you so much, gentlemen.